Over a year ago, I made a video where I talked about the only bad operator in Arknights, Frostleaf. The main issue I had with her was that the role of a movement-based crowd controller works antithetically to an operator with 2 block. If Frostleaf is blocking an enemy, slowing or binding them won't do anything. Since she's balanced around having lower damage output, she ends up functioning as an underperforming guard, and in that video I recommended that in order to help Frostleaf properly function in her role as a melee crowd controller, she should inflict cold as much as she inflicts slow. If you don't know, cold reduces an enemy's attack speed by 30, so even if Frostleaf or someone else is blocking the enemy that Frostleaf is debuffing, Frostleaf is still functioning as a crowd controller. Come the time for Frostleaf's module, she gained the ability to inflict cold. It's just not at all consistent with her ability to inflict slow or bind on her skills. Her module didn't actually help her role as a crowd controller. It is an objective buff, but said buff is nowhere near consistent enough to be relied upon akin to her slow and bind. And since this is Frostleaf's only module, this is all Frostleaf will ever be. Underwhelming and unbefitting of her role as a melee crowd controller. The reason why I'm upset with this isn't because I hate Frostleaf. I'm not like the many people who see Frostleaf merely as a joke. To me, I see potential in her. The concept of a crowd controlling lord that functions like Frostleaf is something that is very interesting to me. It just ran into the roadblock of, well, slow not really mattering if the enemy isn't moving due to being blocked. Frostleaf could be a pretty cool and interesting defensive support operator, given her kit was more tuned toward her subclass. To me, it's a shame Frostleaf can't reach her potential, because I think she'd be a really fun operator given she could. I see this not as a problem with Frostleaf though, nor her proposed change. Instead, it's a problem with the system that enacted the change. Modules. Modules should never be used to fix an operator's design flaws. Despite this is the role that they have taken on, even if the system itself is horrible for that purpose. Explaining why is the point of this video. Before I get into that though, talking about balance in Arknights is a pain in the ass, since it more often than not just devolves into people complaining that an operator isn't as easy or comfy to use as they wish. And so, I'm going to establish what I mean by balanced, and what I feel the purpose of a balance patch module would be. Imagine if you gave every operator in the game a strength rating from 1 to 10 and put them on a graph. What is considered balance would be considered so by the standard of balance, or an imaginary line that separates the graph into 2. If you're above the standard of balance, you're overtuned. If you're under it, you're undertuned. But since Arknights and most other things are quite intricate systems, a margin of error is allowed. In my case, that margin of error stretches from 4 to 6, which is where 4 and 5 stars typically reside. Gitano at 4, Caper at 5, Tequila at 6. This is what I consider to be balanced. 7s are above or overtuned, 3s and below are undertuned. Most 6 stars in the game exist at 7 or above, and as time moves on, I wouldn't be surprised if power creep adds on an 11 or 12 to this list. However, no matter how strong 6 stars will get, the standard of balance will remain at 4, 5, and 6. Why is that though? Well, it's obvious to me that Hypergriff does deliberately design 4 and 5 stars within a similar power level, and although 6 stars have been severely power crept as the years have went on, 4 and 5 stars have not. And as someone who primarily uses 4 and 5 stars, I have no problem with engaging with the game's content. They are not so weak that the game is impossible to approach. Often 6 stars feel needlessly strong when dealing with the exact same content. The game seems to be designed around the standard of the 4 and 5 star power level, with 6 stars being a premium level of power given to those who want it. And so, to me, to consider balance to be anything above 4 and 5 stars seems arbitrary, because how can something be so weak that it's unbalanced, yet also clear content properly? And so, balance patches in Arknights should help retain this general standard of balance for 4 and 5 stars. But should it nerf 6 stars? No. Although 6 stars are most certainly unbalanced, their power level appeals to those who enjoy that level of power. Although a player like me may enjoy using 4s, 5s, and 6s, someone may enjoy 6s, 7s, and 8s, some 9s and 10s, and so nerfing an operator from 9 to 5 may make the 4, 5, and 6 player happy, but it will piss off the 9 and 10 player who invested tons of resources into that nerfed operator. In the same way though, buffing an operator too much can also affect its appeal. Buff Neural so that she's as strong as Shu, and now people who enjoyed Neural for her power level won't use her. And so operator balance is delicate in a single player game. Although in an ideal world, every operator would be a 4, 5, or 6, ideal worlds also aren't profitable, since for some reason people monetarily support power creep. Does this mean that we shouldn't buff operators? No, I think it's important that we make changes when necessary, but it's not as easily as it may initially appear. Modules are the saving grace for an operator when it comes to giving them a well-needed buff. However, the system as a whole fails at doing just that. In Frostleaf's case, she got her module. Her module did correctly tackle her issue, however, it didn't provide the consistency that was needed for it to properly give Frostleaf the defensive crowd control role that she desperately needed. The module was a buff, but it didn't actually fix the issue with her kit. And since for non-6 stars, modules are a one-time buff, the operator has one chance to be fixed, and if they're not, they're fresh out of luck. However, as I just said, modules buffing operators doesn't always mean the operator is fixed, because buffing and fixing operators are two completely different things. You can buff Frostleaf's damage all you want, but that won't actually make her a better operator. You can keep buffing her attack until she's as viable as other DPS lords, but that won't make her a good operator. Operators are defined by their niche and their identity. An issue with modules is that modules can't actually change what already exists. They can only add onto it or buff numbers. Modules require resources to unlock an upgrade, and so if you threaten to rework an operator through a module, it may not be seen as an objective buff, thus raising the question as to why should I put resources into something if it doesn't objectively make it stronger. Modules by nature of being an upgrade system can never allow for mechanical reworks due to the investment required for it. Gitano, for example, is an operator with a talent that provides nothing of actual value to her kit. You can buff its effects all you want, but it doesn't make the talent any better if its design doesn't properly define her role in any way. Gitano is meant to be a progression on lava, being a 4-star baseline splashcaster. Issue is, the main benefit of baseline operators is consistency, something that her talent just doesn't provide. Rather than simply just scrapping the talent and trying to make something more definitive for her usage, instead her module just expands her range and buffs her talent, as if a 33% chance to receive 5% more attack really makes a difference. Now, mechanical reworks shouldn't try and make new operators out of pre-existing operators. We shouldn't give Gitano some random-ass talent that completely redefines her. Instead, mechanical reworks should try and look at operators and see how they can better fit the role that they were initially designed for. Quartz is an operator whom I obviously love, but I do have a problem with her kit, her S2. Her S2 doesn't properly align with her subclass. She's a tank, yet she takes more damage. Crushers are focused on instance damage, yet her skill increases attack speed. Even if the skill is good on paper, it's not a skill that properly works with how Crushers are designed. But fixing this can't be done with modules. She already got her module. All modules can touch are base stats, branch trait, and talents. Skills can't be fixed, no matter what. As I was saying, patches should try and attune for different kinds of players. Players who use 7s and 8s are typically more focused on how comfortable an operator is to use than players like me. And although on paper these separate issues can be addressed separately with modules, the nature of modules being given on a by-subclass basis can ruin this. People complained about duelists, so they made a fix that walks back the main mechanic of their subclass. Now Aurora, an operator designed around that mechanic, has a trait that contradicts her talent. Aurora's talent heals her while her SP is less than half and has her attack while greater than half. This takes advantage of her only gaining SP while blocking by letting Aurora heal back up after a fight where she uses a skill, only forcing her back into combat when an enemy approaches her. It's a really well designed talent that I feel should have been the basis for how duelists were designed, but despite this, her module goes against it. Luckily, it isn't severe enough to actually hinder her usage, but regardless, it's still a contradiction. And because of this, Cement, an operator who released with the module, ends up designed completely differently from Aurora because she was designed with the duelist trait change in mind. An entire gimmick that could have made way for plenty of design space is now squandered because Eunectus players complained. The change was made because of Eunectus in an attempt to make her more appealing towards her target audience, and the end result was a sanitized Aurora in Cement. Another example of this is with Hunters. People complained about the Hunter's ammo mechanic, and so their module seeks to alleviate this issue by letting them reload an extra ammo while their clip is empty. Although this is a strict improvement for Ray, it ends up contradicting Cold Shot's main gimmick. Like Aurora, Cold Shot was designed with this restriction in mind. You are rewarded for activating her S2 while she has no ammo with a big damage increase. And although the trait change is still a strict buff, it does still contradict the main goal of Cold Shot and probably future Hunters. The point of these anecdotes is to show that even though modules are designed for different player experiences, the nature of each module's trait change being tied to the module type can negatively affect other operators in the subclass, even stunting future potential by completely rewriting what a subclass even is. This issue can be avoided simply by making these kinds of changes on a by-operator basis as opposed to a by-subclass basis, something which goes against the module system. And this is of course even assuming that the main point of modules is to buff operators. Although that is a role that they have and is certainly how they're perceived, that isn't what they are at all. Hypergraph wants every operator to eventually have a module, needed or not, and since modules are to be released on a by subclass basis rather than on a by operator basis in order to speed up this process, loads of operators who don't need modules in the slightest are being given modules just because. And if you're a newly released operator who will release with a module, your module will do basically nothing but implement whatever trait change that apparently makes you better. A vast majority of modules in Arknights are simply given to operators for the sake of giving them a trait change and a buff to their talent. And although some of these can be significant, all it really does is make the modules act as if they're masteries of talents if anything else. And if you're an operator who releases with a module who does have some issues that need to be fixed, then you're straight out of luck. The worst part is how these different uses for modules end up clashing with each other. Some modules aren't there to make up for flaws in operators' design, but simply to add more layers to their usage. Flag bearers are already great, so their module adds some extra complexity to their kit, giving them the interesting use of giving the operator in front of them an extra block while their skills are active. These kinds of modules are pretty cool simply because they add more gameplay diversity. I feel they are justified in their addition, but most certainly don't exist to balance an underwhelming or underperforming operator. They are simply there as an additional layer of performance upgrades. And so you have to choose between using your module blocks to allow for weaker operators to catch up, or you can throw your module blocks towards mastering already good operators to be better. And since, again, every operator is to eventually receive a module, it begs the question as to why it's the module system that's even being used to allow for balance changes in the first place. I'm sure that's what the original intention was, but just like every other gacha game who has a similar balance patch disguised as an upgrade mechanic, the system ends up being universalized for everyone and concept crept out of what it was originally meant to be. It always ends up paling in comparison to an actual straight up balance patch. And this isn't even mentioning the hundreds of modules that provide no meaningful benefit to the operator and purely exist because of mechanical oversaturation. Everyone gets a module, needed or not. Hypergraph, especially recently, isn't allowing for any breathing room between a subclass's release and their modules. Earthshakers and Alchemists have already both received their modules on CN, despite neither subclass really needing the buff and both subclasses only being populated by 2 operators. And no, neither trait change makes a meaningful difference in their usage. It is entirely superfluous and exists to buff for the sake of a buff. Shapercasters, a subclass that hasn't been global yet, at least at the time of writing this, have also had their modules announced. Shapercasters got introduced and received a module before being added to EN, and both Necras and Techno will receive different modules. Why? No fucking clue. Frankly, the module system is awful at handling balance patches. It would be so much less restrictive to both Hypergraph and the player base if they just released proper balancing patches as opposed to, I don't know, leaving us waiting for when Frostleaf will receive her second module, the thing 4 stars just don't get. It's also funny to see how the module system is just another way for Hypergraph to push elemental damage with the Delta modules. Yeah, they're withholding certain important pieces of the elemental damage combo from you, but it shouldn't matter as long as you pay this premium to mod a 6-star you totally have. Now, assuming we ever do get proper balance patches that go beyond simply just changing splashcaster numbers or making geeks unable to kill themselves, because all of the issues that have led to modules making bad changes have all been due to the nature of modules as a mechanic. Hypergraph have been good this far at keeping operators within the bounds of power for who they're actually meant for. I doubt if they could, they would release a patch that makes Dusk, Chen, or Rosmantis the new Wishadel or Logos. I mean, what are they going to do? Give Exusiai, an operator who is perfectly fine being as balanced as she is, some insane buff that completely rids her of any innate downsides of her subclass? Okay, there is one upside to the module system. This singular upside only applies to 6 stars. Since 6 stars get 2 modules, both modules can be designed for 2 completely different levels of power, appealing to 2 completely different kinds of players. An example of this would be Crownslayer. People wanted more out of her S3, and she got a mod that gave people more out of her S3. But because the module system allows for players to switch between modules, I can continue to enjoy her Executor X mod. Outside of this one case, which really only applies to like Exusiai and Crownslayer, modules serve no benefit to be used as a balance system. More often than not, they don't do anything to serve game balance and are more often just a trait or talent mastery system, if anything. Now listen, I have been quite negative throughout the course of this video, which typically is not what I do. I'm normally someone who preaches about finding the qualities in everything, and that it isn't the operators, but the players that make a difference. And so, talking about buffing operators is most certainly odd. Listen, nothing is perfect, and that includes both operators and players. I don't enjoy talking about what makes operators bad simply because I often feel that there's little point to it. If I call an operator bad, what exactly does that mean? We can have discussions talking about what could be done to fix an operator, but like I said in the beginning of the video, I feel it often just devolves into most players wanting easier to use operators rather than better designed ones. And sometimes it's hard to propose honest changes because players can feel offended that an operator they already enjoy using needs to be changed. Trust me, I know. And even in my case, perhaps what I consider to be needing a buff is nonsense to someone else. To me, I don't find these kinds of conversations to be rather interesting. I'd rather talk about the positives than the negatives as a way to encourage people to try out new things rather than discourage people from doing something they might enjoy. Or you can say that I'm coping. And if you do that, then I'm going to say that you're coping. And then we're both coping about a fucking anime mobile game. I don't even fucking know. Anyways, remember, there are no bad operators, even though I wouldn't mind an appropriate buff here or there. Thank you all for watching, and I love you all.